Hey YouTube, Dawson Rider here. Welcome to my review for the penultimate episode of Kamen Rider Gavv. And I have to say, this was, spoiler alert for just my general thoughts on it, this was an overall solid episode. A good, solid part 1 of 2 of a finale. First half of an episode if they did hour-long finales. But I kind of wish Gavv's finale felt more intense for me. I don't know if it's just me. I think it's just because until the last 4 or 5 episodes, we were in this kind of weird lull where things weren't bad, but it didn't feel like we were in the later half of the series. And as a result, everything has been enjoyable, but I don't feel as invested as I usually am with a series I like this much when it comes to the finale arc. It's not like a series like Ninja or Gotchard where I'm not really invested or I don't like the show very much, so as a result, I don't feel very locked into the final episodes. But it also isn't as intense and engaging as a lot of other series like Build or Go Busters or Gaim or something like that. Just in terms of series I feel a similar fondness for, and yet it feels like good solid stuff, but it feels like going through the motions in a way. Yep, we're getting this done. But still, overall solid. You have Longo taking the president's plan and initiating the Leap to Your Doom protocol as he does. And as a result, you have all these people missing, and we already know what happened. They disappeared at 2:17 a.m., and it was Gladys that did it. But they had to figure it out anyways, and so you have Shoma being okay, I can save the people that are already leaping to their doom with my plan, while Honto and Lakia go to the Dark Dimension, I don't know why I called it that, but go to the Granite Dimension to save all the people that are already pressed. And there's a nice little scene between the three of them where they're thanks for sticking with me, or Shoma says thanks for sticking with me, and it just reminds me that this dynamic not only reminds me of the dynamic of the Build characters, but for whatever reason, the core trio and Agito as well. But anyway, they go do their separate things. So Honto and Lakia are at the Dark Treat Factory trying to save everyone, putting them all in a laundry bin from a hotel. And then there's this point where Lakia kind of has to, quote-unquote, sacrifice himself. I don't think he's dying, but he has to, hold off a bunch of granites and fight them while Honto escapes. And even though I don't think he's dying, I think he's going to pop out of the granite world and they'll be like, you survived or anything. I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll get a he sacrificed himself moment, but he'll be back for the V-Cinema thing next week. Probably not. But it did remind me a bit, just with the Build comparisons, of, Grease's little sacrifice that happened in the Build finale, just because of the dynamic and circumstances. But that happens there, and Honto then gets tackled out of the world by Jeeb because he's waiting for Shoma, but Shoma hasn't Shoma'd up yet because he's busy with his plot. And Jeeb tackles Honto out, and they set up a fight with them. And you do have some stuff with Jeeb in this episode as well, as Longo's look, we're back in charge. Jeeb, you don't need your wife anymore. It's part of the plan. And clearly, they've developed an affection for each other. I thought last week they might go for some sort of, loyalty thing between the two of them, with the couple and the war between Land and Sea. No, that's next year. But the war between Longo and the president. But then they kill the president off, so I'm I guess there's not a conflict there. But I'll be curious to see where those two end up in regards to their storylines. But Shoma, meanwhile, has this plan to cure everybody that's leaping to their doom, and it kind of results in a bit of a revelation for his uncle character. He still doesn't find out he's his uncle. And I'm going to be honest, it's not like I hate this story, but I just really am not invested in this storyline at all. It's fine, but I just really don't care about Shoma's uncle and his almost Guy Gardner haircut. But you do have him working with Lakia, because he calls... not Lakia, I'm sorry. Hachika. He calls her up and I need some snacks stat, because I gotta power up. And, he doesn't understand why he needs snacks, and he's well, it just boosts his spirits in tough situations, and he's oh, my sister was the same way. So that's kind of a nice moment. But she makes, a smorgasbord. Wow. When was the last time I used that word? But she makes a bunch of stuff, and then he's that's great, but I need cotton candy, because I have a plan. Obviously, he still does use the food that she made, but it's kind of that weird, just talk about, I need food, and cotton candy will save everyone, that makes the uncle suspicious, what's going on here with this? And he's look, I'm a Kamen Rider. He's what is a Kamen Rider? He's the Defenders of Antara. And he's I understand, I'm on board, what do you need? And they make the cotton candy, and I feel I kind of get it, because it's the idea of maybe it being a cloud, because then they rain it over people and it saves them. We've seen that in a lot of different movies, actually, where there's some sort of rain antidote. But also, I'm does that kind of make sense? Because I don't think of cotton candy as watery. I'm overthinking it. It's not a negative. It's just something I was what could have else been used that would be more of a watery snack? Regardless, though, it was nice to see the marshmallow form, because I feel we haven't seen any of the ability forms in a hot minute. But that plan does work. He uses the cotton candy rain. And then before he's headed off to meet with Honto, Longo shows up and he's we gotta have our finale fight. So, yeah, solid episode. Like I said, it feels we're going through the motions. I don't mean that in a paint by numbers. This is so generically bad way, but like I said, I just don't feel as locked in as other series. It'll be interesting to see how I feel after the finale airs and when I'm doing the series review and thinking about how the series lands for me overall. Because it's a series I have similar fondness to a series like Gaim, Build, for Rider and stuff. But I feel like I'm just not as locked into the finale, even though this was all solid. It just feels, like I said, going through the motions, just because I don't think there's a lot of surprises left. And especially since I know that Rider nowadays, like I've mentioned in previous videos, doesn't end on a unique note anymore so much. I talked about that during the story arc when Shoma was working with Neville, that Rider used to end on kind of a more unique note, where its finales were strange or bittersweet, but now it's very paint by the numbers, so I don't find myself wondering, like, oh, what unique note will this end on? I'm like, it'll probably be a pretty, tied up in a bow ending, obviously with some doors open for V-Cinemas and all that stuff. But anyways, guys, let me know what you thought of the episode in the comments as always. Till next time, Dawson Rider, signing out.